Picture people on a beach, lying in the sun like lizards soaking up warmth. But watch closely. They're not really resting. They're adjusting their hair, choosing the right angle, checking how they look. Even in rest, there's this performance, this constant preparation to be seen, to be attractive, to be enough. And here's the thing that might break your heart open. You do this too. Not just on beaches, everywhere, all the time. What if you could finally stop? You wake up, and before your feet touch the floor, it starts. That voice. Did I get enough sleep? I look so tired. There's so much to do today, and I'm already behind. Am I doing enough? Am I enough? All day long, there's this commentary, this relentless inner voice evaluating everything. How you sounded in that conversation. People probably thought you were awkward. You're falling behind everyone else. When you finally sit down to rest, the voice says, you should be doing something. You're being lazy. You're wasting your life. Even your rest is a performance. Even your solitude is crowded with judgment. We're going to walk an ancient path together, 2,500 years old, and it understands exactly what you're experiencing. We're going to find where this voice came from, why it's so loud, and how to transform it into something quieter, kinder. If you can, get comfortable. Your pace, no rush. Let's walk together. The masters who walked this path before us discovered something profound. They didn't just observe that we suffer. They looked deeper, asking, why? What creates this relentless inner voice? What feeds the exhaustion? What keeps us trapped in the performance, even when we desperately want to stop? And what they found wasn't a single cause, but a pattern. A system of obstacles that block our natural peace, the way clouds block the sun. They gave these obstacles a name: hindrances. Not because you're broken, but because they hinder something that's already there. Your capacity for peace, for clarity, for simply being without the constant commentary. There are 5 of them. And once you learn to recognize them, you'll see them everywhere. Not just in meditation, but in traffic, in conversations, in the quiet moments when you're alone with yourself. The first is sense desire. This isn't about wanting things. Wanting is natural, human, completely normal. Sense desire is different. It's the craving that never satisfies. The hunger that grows even as you feed it. You know this feeling. You're scrolling through your phone, and one video leads to another, and another, and suddenly an hour has vanished, and you feel worse than when you started. Or you're eating, not because you're hungry, but because something in you is searching for satisfaction through taste, through sensation, through anything that might fill the void for a moment. Sense desire whispers, if you just get this, you'll be satisfied. This meal, this purchase, this experience, this person's approval. And you believe it because the whisper is so convincing. So you reach for it. And for a moment, there's pleasure. For a moment, the void seems filled. But then it empties again. And the craving returns, stronger than before. The Buddha saw this pattern 2,500 years ago, before smartphones, before consumer culture, before any of the modern tools of desire. He saw it in the human heart itself. The way we reach outward, endlessly, hoping the next thing will be the thing that finally completes us. But completion doesn't come from outside. And sense desire keeps you locked in the search, convinced that peace is just one more acquisition away. The second hindrance is ill will. This is the voice that criticizes, the one that judges, resents, attacks. Sometimes it's turned outward, anger at the person who cut you off in traffic, irritation at your coworker's incompetence, resentment towards someone who has what you want. But often, it's turned inward. And this is where it becomes the sergeant, the harsh judge, the voice that never approves. Ill will toward yourself sounds like this. You're so stupid. Why did you say that? Everyone else has it figured out, and you're still struggling. You're not disciplined enough, not smart enough, not enough. Here's what's tragic about ill will. It thinks it's helping. It genuinely believes that if it's harsh enough, critical enough, relentless enough, you'll finally change into someone worthy. But cruelty doesn't create growth. It creates shame, and shame creates paralysis. You've experienced this. You make a mistake, and the voice attacks. And instead of learning from the mistake, you collapse under the weight of the criticism. You feel small, worthless, incapable. And from that collapsed place, how can you possibly grow? Ill will masquerades as motivation, but it's actually the opposite. It's the inner bully who thinks punishment leads to improvement. The third hindrance is sloth and torpor. This is the heaviness, the fog, The feeling of being stuck in mud, unable to move, unable to care. Sometimes it's physical. You're so tired you can barely keep your eyes open, even though you slept 8 hours. Sometimes it's mental. Your thoughts move slowly. Everything feels like it's happening underwater. Sometimes it's emotional, a numbness that makes everything feel distant and unreal. This isn't the same as rest. Rest is nourishing, rejuvenating, necessary. Sloth and torpor is different. It's a dullness that resists engagement with life. A shutdown response that says, I can't deal with this, so I'm checking out. You know this state. You sit down to do something important, and suddenly you're so tired you can't think. Or you feel a pull toward distraction, toward anything that requires no effort, no presence, no real attention. It's not laziness, though the voice will call it that. It's often a protection mechanism. When life feels overwhelming, when the demands are too much, when you don't know how to move forward, the mind simply dulls. It's the opposite of ill will's aggression. Where ill will attacks, sloth and torpor retreats. Where ill will burns hot, sloth and torpor goes cold. The fourth hindrance is restlessness and worry. Remember the 60,000 thoughts, the 80% that are negative, the 90% that are just repetitions. This is restlessness and worry in action. It's the mind that can't settle. The constant fizzing of anxiety, the low-level panic that hums underneath everything. Even when nothing is actively wrong, there's this feeling that something could be wrong, might be wrong, will definitely be wrong soon. You're lying in bed, trying to sleep, and the mind won't stop. Did I lock the door? What if that email sounded rude? I have so much to do tomorrow. Why did I eat that? I should be further along in life by now. Round and round, the thoughts spiral. Not productive thoughts that lead to solutions, just worry that feeds on itself. This is the cascade the masters spoke about. When you first try to meditate, when you first try to be still, you discover just how loud this hindrance is. And it's shocking. You think, I'm going crazy. There's something wrong with me. I can't do this. But the masters knew. This isn't new chaos. This is old chaos finally being seen. You're not creating the restlessness by meditating. You're just finally noticing what's been running in the background all along. The fifth hindrance is doubt. not the healthy skepticism that questions and investigates, but the paralyzing doubt that whispers, "This won't work for you. You're not capable of this. Other people can find peace, but you're different. You're too broken, too far gone, too flawed." This is spiritual doubt manifesting as low self-worth. It's the voice that says, even if these teachings are true, even if this path works for others, it won't work for me. You've heard this voice. Maybe you're hearing it right now. Who are you to think you can meditate? Who are you to seek enlightenment? You can't even get through a day without scrolling your phone for hours. You can't even rest without guilt. How could you possibly walk a spiritual path? Doubt is insidious because it masquerades as realism. It says, "I'm just being honest about my limitations." But it's not honesty. It's fear. Fear that if you try and fail, you'll prove what you've always suspected, that you're not enough. So doubt keeps you from trying at all. Now here's what the masters understood that changes everything. These 5 hindrances don't operate in isolation. They interact. They reinforce each other. They create feedback loops that keep you trapped. Watch how it works. Sense desire reaches for something to fill the void. Let's say you're scrolling social media. You see someone's success, and ill will arises. Comparison, envy, resentment. That resentment feels bad, so sloth and torpor kicks in. You feel heavy, numb, disconnected. The numbness is uncomfortable, so restlessness and worry start spinning. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just be happy for them? I'm such a terrible person. And then doubt arrives with the final blow. See, you're too broken for this. You'll never change. 5 minutes. One simple scroll. All 5 hindrances activated in a chain reaction. Or another pattern. You sit down to meditate because you know you should. Restlessness and worry immediately flood in. Your mind is chaos. You can't focus. Doubt whispers, "You're doing it wrong. You're not cut out for this." Ill will joins in. "You're so undisciplined. Why can't you do something so simple?" That criticism feels harsh. So sloth and torpor dulls everything. Suddenly, you're so tired. Meditation can wait. And then sense desire offers an escape. Just check your phone for a minute. Just watch one video. The hindrances work together. They're a system, not isolated problems. And when you see the system, you start to understand why simply trying harder doesn't work. You can't willpower your way out of a feedback loop. But here's the hope. These aren't character flaws. They're not evidence that you're broken, or bad, or uniquely flawed. They're universal human experiences that the Buddha identified 2,500 years ago. Everyone experiences these hindrances. The difference between suffering and freedom isn't whether you have them. It's whether you recognize them. When you don't recognize them, they control you. Sense desire pulls you toward endless consumption. Ill will makes you cruel to yourself and others. Sloth and torpor keeps you stuck. Restlessness and worry exhaust you. Doubt prevents you from even trying. But when you learn to see them, when you can notice, oh, that's sense desire, that's ill will, that's doubt, they begin to lose their grip. Not overnight, not through a single insight, but gradually, through patient recognition, they weaken. And the masters discovered antidotes, practices that specifically address each hindrance, ways to work with them that don't require fighting or suppressing, just understanding and redirecting. We'll learn those practices. But first, you need to understand something even deeper. You need to understand who or what these hindrances are happening to. Because here's the question that changes everything. If there's a voice criticizing you, who is the critic? And who is being criticized? The masters looked at this question very carefully. And what they found was shocking. When you look for the self that's being judged, the self that's inadequate, the self that needs to be fixed, you can't find it. Not because you're looking in the wrong place, but because it doesn't exist the way you think it does. This teaching is called anatta, not self. And it's one of the most liberating and most misunderstood teachings in Buddhism. Let's be clear about what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean you don't exist. You're clearly here, reading these words, having experiences. It doesn't mean nothing matters, or that you're an illusion. What it means is this: the solid, permanent, independent self that you think you are, the one the voice is criticizing, that doesn't exist. You're not a fixed thing. You're a process. The Buddha explained this through what he called the 5 aggregates These are the components that come together to create the experience of being you. First, there's form. Your body, the physical sensations, the flesh and blood and bones. But is your body you? It's constantly changing. Cells dying, new cells forming. The you of 10 years ago, physically, is almost entirely gone. Second, there's feeling. Not emotions, but the basic quality of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral that colors every experience. But is feeling you? Feelings arise and pass constantly. One moment pleasant, the next unpleasant. Which one is the real you? Third, there's perception. The way you recognize and label things. This is a tree. This is a face. This is danger. This is safety. But perception is shaped by conditioning, by past experiences, by culture. It's not solid or permanent. It changes as you learn, as you grow. Fourth, there are mental formations. Thoughts, emotions, habits, tendencies, the voice itself. But are these you? They arise and pass, constantly changing. Sometimes you're angry, sometimes peaceful, sometimes confused, sometimes clear. Which state is the real you? Fifth, there's consciousness. The awareness that knows all of this is happening. But even consciousness arises and passes. It depends on conditions, sense organs, objects, attention. When you sleep deeply without dreams, where is consciousness? So which one is you? The body that's constantly changing? The feelings that arise and pass? The perceptions that shift with experience? The mental formations that come and go like weather? The consciousness that depends on so many conditions? When you look carefully, you can't find a solid, permanent self anywhere. What you find instead is a process, a flowing river of experiences, constantly changing, constantly becoming. And here's why this matters for the voice that's been tormenting you. The voice criticizes a you that it believes is solid and permanent. It says, you are lazy, you are inadequate, you are flawed. It treats these qualities as fixed, unchangeable facts about who you are. But if there's no fixed self, these criticisms lose their sting. You're not permanently anything. You're not a lazy person. Sometimes lazy tendencies arise. You're not an inadequate person. Sometimes feelings of inadequacy arise. You're not a flawed person. Sometimes you act in ways you regret. Do you feel the difference? One is identity. The other is experience. Identity is fixed, permanent, damning. Experience is fluid, temporary, workable. Let me give you a concrete example. You're driving and someone cuts you off. Immediately, you feel anger, but then you personalize it. That person is an idiot. They're reckless. They're inconsiderate. But here's what's actually happening. There's a person in a car, experiencing their own stress, their own hurry, their own distraction. They're not attacking you personally. They don't even know who you are. They're just a human in their own process, making a choice that happened to intersect with your path. But the mind creates a story, a solid enemy, someone who wronged you. This is what we do constantly. We take fluid processes and solidify them into fixed identities. Someone disagrees with you on social media, and they become an enemy. You fail at something, and you become a failure. You feel anxious, and you become an anxious person. But what if you're not a person who is anxious? What if anxiety is just arising right now, like weather, like a passing cloud? This is the relief of anatta. If there's no fixed self, you can't be permanently broken. The you who made that mistake yesterday, that configuration of body, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, it's already gone, changed, replaced by this moment's you. You can't step in the same river twice, because the river is always flowing. And you can't be the same person twice, because you're always changing. This doesn't mean you're not responsible for your actions. It means you're not condemned by them. The voice wants to convince you that you are your worst moments, that your mistakes define you permanently, that who you were at your lowest is who you truly are. But the truth is, there is no true you. There's just this ever-changing process of becoming. And if everything is already changing, you're already free. You just haven't noticed yet. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Not only is there no fixed self, there's no independent self either. You didn't create yourself in isolation. You're not a separate island unconnected to everything around you. This is the teaching of dependent origination, paticca samuppada in the old language, and it's considered by many masters to be the heart of the Buddha's insight. The teaching says this: everything that exists arises because of conditions. Nothing exists independently, on its own, separate from everything else. Think about a flower. Can a flower exist without soil? Without rain? Without sun? Without the seed that came from another flower? Without the insects that pollinated it? Without the entire ecosystem that supports its existence? When you look at a flower, you're not seeing an independent thing. You're seeing soil, rain, sun, seeds, insects, air, time, all coming together in this temporary form we call flower. The same is true for you. You didn't create yourself. You arose because of conditions. Your parents, your culture, your language, your experiences, your education, your traumas, your joys, all of it shaped who you are right now. The food you ate today is literally becoming your body. The thoughts you think are influenced by every conversation you've ever had. The emotions you feel are shaped by patterns learned in childhood and reinforced over years. You are the result of countless causes and conditions, most of which you didn't choose and can't control. So when the voice says, "You should be different, you should be better, why can't you just change?" The answer is, because you are the product of everything that came before. This isn't an excuse. It's not permission to give up or stop trying. It's understanding. And understanding brings compassion. When you see how you were shaped by conditions beyond your control, how can you be so harsh with yourself? When you see that the voice itself was installed by experiences you didn't ask for, how can you take its judgments as absolute truth? The Buddha described this process of dependent origination through 12 links. Each link conditions the next, creating a chain that leads from ignorance to suffering. It's not important to memorize all 12 links. What's important is to see the pattern. Ignorance leads to mental formations. Mental formations lead to consciousness. Consciousness leads to name and form. Name and form lead to the 6 sense bases. The sense bases lead to contact. Contact leads to feeling. Feeling leads to craving. Craving leads to clinging. Clinging leads to becoming. Becoming leads to birth. Birth leads to aging and death, to sorrow and suffering. It's a chain, one link leading to the next, automatically, unless you interrupt it. Let me show you how this works in daily life. You're scrolling social media. You see someone's post about their success, a promotion, a beautiful vacation, a perfect family moment. Contact happens. Your eyes meet the image. Feeling arises, unpleasant, a tightness in your chest. Craving follows. You want what they have, or you want to feel differently than you feel right now. Clinging happens. Your mind grabs onto the comparison, building a story about how your life doesn't measure up. And suffering results. You feel inadequate, behind, less than. The whole chain happens in seconds. You didn't consciously choose it. It unfolded automatically, link by link. But here's the powerful part. You can break the chain. Not by avoiding contact. You can't control what you see. Not by suppressing feeling. Feelings arise naturally. But at the point of craving. At the moment when feeling could lead to craving, or could just be feeling. This is where awareness enters. You see the post. Contact. Feeling arises. Unpleasant. And right there, before craving solidifies, you notice. Oh, there's an unpleasant feeling. There's a pull to compare. There's the beginning of a story about inadequacy. And in that noticing, the chain can break. You don't have to follow the pull. You don't have to build the story. You can just see feeling unpleasant, impermanent, and move on. This is the practice. Not perfection, but recognition. Not eliminating feelings, but not being controlled by them either. Another example. You make a mistake at work. Your boss points it out. Contact. You hear the words. Feeling unpleasant, sharp. And then the chain usually unfolds automatically. Craving to be seen differently, to undo the mistake. Clinging to shame, to the identity of someone who messed up. Suffering, you feel worthless. You catastrophize. You imagine being fired. You spiral. But with awareness, you can interrupt. Mistake happened. Boss noticed. Feeling arose. Unpleasant. And then pause. Do I need to build a story about this? Do I need to make this mean I'm inadequate? Or can I just acknowledge, yes, I made a mistake, I'll fix it, and this doesn't define my worth? Breaking the chain doesn't require superhuman willpower. It requires seeing the chain in the first place. And the more you see it, the more freedom you have. This isn't blame. You didn't create the chain. It's ancient, automatic, human. But it is yours to work with. This is understanding. And understanding is freedom. Now there's one more teaching that ties all of this together. One more insight that the masters discovered about why you suffer and how you can be free. It's the teaching of impermanence. Anicca. Everything changes. Everything. All the time. You know this intellectually. Of course, things change. Seasons change, people age, circumstances shift. But do you really know it? Do you live as if it's true? Because here's what we actually do. We treat our identities as permanent. We treat our emotions as fixed states. We treat our circumstances as solid facts about our lives. I am an anxious person. I am someone who can't meditate. I am stuck in this situation. I am defined by my past. But the truth? The you who made that mistake 5 years ago literally doesn't exist anymore. Not metaphorically, literally. Every cell in your body has been replaced. The neural pathways in your brain have been rewired through every experience you've had since then. The person you were then and the person you are now share a continuous thread of memory, but they're not the same. You can't step in the same river twice, the old teaching says. Because by the time you step in again, it's different water. And you can't be the same person twice. Because by the next moment, you've already changed. This is liberation. If everything is impermanent, nothing can define you permanently. The voice wants you to believe in permanent identities. You're lazy. You're broken. You're unworthy. These are fixed facts about who you are, the voice insists. But they're not facts. They're temporary states, arising and passing, based on conditions. You felt lazy yesterday because you were exhausted from poor sleep and emotional depletion. Different conditions, good rest, supportive environment, meaningful purpose, and that laziness dissolves. You felt broken after that relationship ended because grief and loss were present. But grief changes. Loss integrates. And you discover you're not broken. You're healing. You're growing. You're becoming something new. There's a story that illustrates this perfectly. A young man, impulsive and reactive, makes countless mistakes. He's the kind of person who acts without thinking, who lets emotions control him, who seems incapable of discipline. Everyone around him sees this as who he is. His family, his friends, probably he sees it himself. This is my nature, he thinks. I'm just impulsive. I can't change. But then something shifts. Maybe he encounters a teaching that resonates. Maybe suffering becomes intense enough that he has to find another way. Maybe conditions simply align in a new direction. And slowly, through practice, through patience, through training the mind, he changes. Not overnight. Not through a single revelation, but day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment. Years later, that same person is unrecognizable. Calm where he was reactive, thoughtful where he was impulsive, disciplined where he was scattered. The impulsive teenager became a monk. Not because impulsiveness was never real, but because it was never permanent. This isn't just a story. This is how change actually works when you understand impermanence. You're not fighting against a fixed nature. You're working with a fluid process. And that process responds to conditions. Change the conditions, and the process shifts. This is why the masters emphasize practice over belief. Because practice creates new conditions. Meditation creates the condition of awareness. Ethical behavior creates the condition of a clear conscience. Studying wisdom creates the condition of right understanding. And these new conditions reshape the process of who you're becoming. But here's where most people get stuck. They fight impermanence instead of working with it. You want to hold on to pleasant experiences. This moment of peace, this feeling of connection, this day when everything went right. You try to preserve it, replicate it, make it permanent. But it can't be permanent, because nothing is. And when it inevitably changes, because it must, you suffer. You think something went wrong. You think you lost something precious. You think if you were just more disciplined, more spiritual, more together, you could have kept it. But the nature of pleasant experiences is to arise and pass, just like unpleasant ones. You also try to push away unpleasant experiences. This anxiety, this sadness, this discomfort, this pain. You want them gone, permanently, right now. But fighting impermanence in this direction also creates suffering. Because the unpleasant experience is already in motion, already changing, already on its way out, if you just let it move. But instead, you clench around it. You make it solid by resisting it. You turn a passing cloud into a prison by insisting it shouldn't be there. Working with impermanence means something different. When something pleasant arises, you enjoy it fully, knowing it's temporary. You don't try to possess it or make it permanent. You appreciate it the way you appreciate a sunset, beautiful, precisely because it won't last. When something unpleasant arises, you make space for it, knowing it's temporary. You don't try to push it away or make it wrong. You acknowledge it the way you acknowledge weather, real, present, and already changing. This is equanimity, not indifference, but wisdom. Caring deeply while understanding that everything moves, everything shifts, everything changes. Let me give you something practical. A way to work with impermanence right now, in your daily life. When you're feeling overwhelmed by an emotion, anger, anxiety, sadness, shame, try this. Don't name it as an identity. Don't say, I am angry, or I am anxious. Instead, say, anger is present, or anxiety is here, right now. Do you feel the difference? I am angry makes anger part of your identity. It's solid, permanent, defining. Anger is present, makes anger a visitor. It's here now, but it's not you, and it won't stay forever. This tiny shift in language reflects a massive shift in understanding. You are not your emotions. You are not your thoughts. You are not your circumstances. These are all temporary experiences arising in awareness, staying for a while, then passing away. And if they're temporary, you don't have to be imprisoned by them. The past self, who made that choice, already gone, changed by every moment since then. The future self you're worried about becoming doesn't exist yet. And what you do now shapes what that future becomes. All you have is this moment, this breath, this choice. And this moment is already different from the last one, which means you're already different too. Forgiveness becomes easier when you understand impermanence. That person who hurt you, they're not the same person now that they were then. The cells in their body have changed. The experiences they've had have reshaped them. The person who hurt you literally doesn't exist anymore in the same form. This doesn't erase the harm. It doesn't mean you have to trust them again or welcome them back into your life. But it means you're not holding on to a ghost. You're not locked in battle with a version of someone who's already gone. The same is true for yourself. You don't have to keep punishing yourself for who you were 5 years ago, 5 months ago, 5 minutes ago. That version of you is already gone. What remains is this moment. And in this moment, you have a choice. Will you carry the past like a stone around your neck? Or will you acknowledge it, learn from it, and let it dissolve into the river of change that it already is? The voice doesn't want you to understand impermanence. Because if you truly understood it, the voice would lose its power. The voice needs you to believe in permanent identities, in fixed flaws, in unchangeable inadequacy, because then it can keep you trapped in shame, trying forever to fix something that was never permanently broken in the first place. But you're not trapped. You never were. Because everything changes, including you. And if everything changes, you're already free. You just haven't noticed yet. So, here's what we've discovered together so far. The 5 hindrances: sense desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. These are the patterns that keep you stuck. Not character flaws, but universal human experiences that can be recognized and worked with. Not self. Anatta, the understanding that there's no solid, permanent, independent self to be criticized in the first place. You're a process, not a thing. A river, not a statue. Dependent origination, the recognition that you arose from conditions you didn't choose, shaped by forces beyond your control. This brings compassion for yourself and understanding of how suffering unfolds, link by link, and how awareness can break the chain. And impermanence, anicca, the truth that everything changes, all the time, including you. Which means you're not defined by your past, not condemned by your mistakes, not limited by who you were. These aren't abstract philosophies. They're direct observations of how reality actually works. The Buddha didn't invent these truths. He discovered them by looking carefully at his own experience. And then he taught them so others could verify them in their own lives. This is what you're doing right now. Not believing something because it sounds nice or spiritual, but investigating your own experience to see if these patterns are actually there. And if you look, you'll see them. You'll see the hindrances operating. You'll notice how they interact and reinforce each other. You'll see the fluidity of self, how you're different in different contexts, different moments, different moods. How the person you think you are is actually a constantly shifting process. You'll see dependent origination in action. How this thought leads to that feeling, which leads to this action, which creates that result. How nothing arises in isolation. You'll see impermanence everywhere. How the anger that felt permanent an hour ago has already shifted. How the anxiety that seemed endless is already different in quality and intensity. And when you see these truths directly, not just intellectually, but experientially, something shifts. The voice begins to quiet. Not because you've fought it into submission, not because you've replaced it with positive affirmations you don't believe, but because you've seen through it. You've seen that it's criticizing a self that doesn't exist the way it thinks it does. You've seen that it's treating temporary states as permanent identities. You've seen that it's trying to solve a problem, your supposed inadequacy, that was created by misunderstanding these fundamental truths. And when you see through it, it loses its authority. The voice might still arise. Old patterns have momentum. But now, you recognize it for what it is. Not truth. Not wisdom. Not protection. Just an old recording, playing on loop, based on a misunderstanding of how you actually work. And with that recognition comes space. Space to choose differently. Space to respond rather than react. Space to be kind to yourself in the midst of imperfection. This is the beginning of transformation. Not fixing yourself, not becoming a better version, but understanding yourself so clearly that the suffering created by misunderstanding begins to dissolve on its own. And what remains? Not perfection, not the absence of challenges or difficulties or uncomfortable emotions. What remains is the capacity to be with what is, without adding layers of suffering on top of it. Pain will still come. Life will still be difficult sometimes. You'll still make mistakes, still feel uncomfortable emotions, still face challenges. But you won't be at war with yourself about it. You won't take every difficulty as evidence of your fundamental inadequacy. You won't treat every mistake as proof that you're permanently flawed. You won't believe the voice when it says you're not enough, you'll never change, you're doing it all wrong. Because you'll know better. You'll know that you're a process, not a thing. That you arose from conditions, not from some essential brokenness. That everything changes, which means you're already changing, already free, already exactly what you need to be in this moment. This is the root of self-mistreatment. Not that you're bad or broken, but that you believed you were solid when you're fluid, permanent when you're changing, independent when you're interconnected, defined by your past, when you're being created fresh in every moment. And now that you see the root, you can begin to transform it. Not through violence, not through force, but through understanding, through practice, through patience, with the process of change that's already happening, whether you cooperate with it or not. The masters discovered this 2,500 years ago. And now you're discovering it too. Welcome to the path. Welcome to freedom. Now we come to the question that matters most. You understand the root of your suffering. You've seen the hindrances, the illusion of a fixed self, the chain of dependent origination, the truth of impermanence. But understanding alone doesn't transform you. You can know intellectually that the voice is wrong, that you're not permanently broken, that everything changes. But if you don't know how to work with that understanding, it remains theory. So the question is, what now? How do you actually walk the path from suffering to peace? The Buddha called his answer the third noble truth. And it's the most hopeful, most radical teaching of all. Suffering can cease completely, not temporarily, not conditionally, but utterly and permanently. He called this cessation nibbana. And before we go any further, we need to clear up what this word means. Because when most people hear nibbana or nirvana in Sanskrit, they imagine something otherworldly, a mystical state reserved for saints and sages, an impossible achievement requiring superhuman discipline and decades of meditation in caves. But that's not what it is. Nibbana literally means extinguishing, like a flame going out. And what's being extinguished isn't you, it's the fire of craving that's been burning your whole life. Think about how exhausting craving is. The constant reaching for more, different, better. The endless dissatisfaction with what is. The relentless hunger that's never truly filled, no matter how much you feed it. That fire burns all the time. Even when you're resting, it's there. Even when you've achieved something, it immediately reorients toward the next achievement. Even when you get what you wanted, it whispers that this isn't quite enough. There must be something more. Nibbana is what happens when that fire goes out. Not because you forced it out, not because you suppressed your desires through willpower, but because you understood craving so completely that it no longer had fuel to burn. And what remains when the fire goes out? Peace. Not as an achievement, but as what was always there underneath the burning. There's an old grandmother's wisdom that captures this perfectly. Ask life for a little less than it gives you. Not as lowered expectations or resignation or settling for mediocrity, but as contentment. Santuti in the old language. Most of us do the opposite. We ask life for more than it can possibly give. We want every day to be perfect, every relationship to fulfill us completely, every moment to be free from discomfort or difficulty. We want to never feel anxious, never be criticized, never make mistakes, never feel the natural pains of being human. And because life can't deliver on these impossible demands, we suffer. Not because life failed us, but because we set up an equation that could never balance. But what if you asked for a little less? What if you expected life to include difficulty, discomfort, loss, change? What if you accepted that some days you'll feel anxious, some relationships will end, some efforts will fail? Then everything else becomes surplus. A gift, an unexpected grace. The pleasant moments aren't just meeting expectations, they're genuine delights. The connections aren't just what you're owed, they're miracles of two human processes finding resonance. The peaceful hours aren't just the absence of problems, they're treasures, savored precisely because, you know, they're temporary. This is contentment. Not settling, but wisdom. Not lowering your standards, but aligning your expectations with reality. And contentment creates the conditions for peace. Now here's something the masters understood that changes everything about how we think of peace. Your mind is naturally clear. Like the sky is naturally clear, even when clouds obscure it. The Buddha used the image of a dusty mirror. The mirror's nature is to reflect clearly. But when dust accumulates on its surface, the reflection becomes obscured, distorted. You are the mirror. The dust is the hindrances, the craving, the ignorance, the belief in a solid self. And peace isn't something you add to the mirror. It's what the mirror does naturally when the dust is removed. This means you don't create peace. You uncover it. You don't achieve clarity. You remove what's obscuring clarity that was always there. This is why the path isn't about becoming a different person, or fixing your fundamental brokenness, or earning your way to worthiness. It's about seeing through the dust. Understanding the hindrances so clearly they begin to dissolve. Recognizing craving so completely it loses its grip. Perceiving impermanence so directly you stop clinging to what's already flowing away. The tradition speaks of 4 stages of awakening. And while we don't need to get technical about this, it's helpful to know the path has markers. Evidence that you're making progress, not just spinning your wheels. The first stage is called stream entry. It's when you've seen the truth clearly enough that you can never fully believe the old lies again. You might still struggle, still fall into old patterns, but there's a part of you that knows the self isn't solid, knows everything changes, knows suffering is optional even when pain isn't. The second stage is when certain hindrances begin to weaken, particularly sense desire and ill will. They still arise, but they don't consume you the way they used to. The third stage is when those hindrances are essentially gone. Not suppressed, but understood so thoroughly they no longer pull you around. And the fourth stage is complete liberation. All 10 fetters broken, all hindrances extinguished, complete peace. Why mention these stages? Not to give you something else to achieve or measure yourself against, but to show you that transformation is gradual, progressive, natural. You don't go from suffering to enlightenment in a single leap. You take steps, small, consistent steps that compound over time. And here's what's beautiful. Even the first small steps bring relief. You don't have to wait until you're fully awakened to experience peace. Every moment of seeing clearly brings a moment of freedom. But what does cessation actually feel like? Not as philosophy, but as lived experience. Because this is what people want to know. Is it bliss? Is it emptiness? Is it something you can even describe? The masters who've experienced it say this. It's the absence of struggle, not the absence of sensation or emotion or life, but the absence of the fight against what is. Imagine you've been clenching your fist your entire life. So long that you forgot you were clenching it. The tension became normal, familiar, just how things are. And then, for a moment, the fist opens. There's no dramatic experience, no fireworks or mystical visions. Just release. The cessation of tension you'd been carrying so long you forgot it was optional. That's what the cessation of craving feels like. Okayness. Completeness. The quiet recognition that right now, in this moment, nothing is missing. Not because everything is perfect. Not because all your problems are solved. But because the fundamental dissatisfaction that's been driving you your whole life has paused. And in that pause, you discover you were always whole. You don't need to acquire anything to be complete. You don't need to become anyone different to be worthy. You don't need to wait for circumstances to align perfectly to be at peace. In this moment, breathing, alive, aware, you're enough. And when you know this experientially, not just intellectually, everything changes. You still engage with life, still work, still create, still form relationships, still have preferences and goals. But it's not driven by the desperate hunger anymore. It's not fueled by the fear that if you don't achieve or acquire or become, you'll be fundamentally lacking. There's a lightness to it, a playfulness almost. Because when you're not trying to prove your worth through achievement, achievement becomes genuinely enjoyable. This is what peace actually is. Not the absence of activity, not withdrawal from life, but engagement without desperation, effort without attachment, care without clinging. And it's available, not as some distant goal, but as a capacity you already have, just waiting to be uncovered. Because peace isn't something you create. It's what remains when you stop creating suffering. So now the question becomes, how do you stop creating suffering? Not through force or suppression or pretending problems don't exist, but through training the mind to see clearly, to stay present, to respond rather than react. This is where practice comes in. And the first practice, the foundation of everything else, is concentration. The Buddha called it samadhi, right concentration, the eighth factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. And before you think this means sitting cross-legged for hours in perfect stillness, understand what concentration actually means. It means training your attention to stay where you place it. That's it. Not mystical, not complicated. Just the ability to choose what you pay attention to and actually attend to it without being constantly pulled away by distraction. Right now, you probably don't have this ability. Not because you're broken, but because you've never trained it. Try this. For the next 10 seconds, pay attention only to your breath. Nothing else. Just the sensation of breathing. How long did you last before a thought pulled you away? 3 seconds? 5? Before you started thinking about what you're having for dinner, or replaying a conversation, or wondering if you're doing this right. This is normal. Your mind has been trained by modern life to jump constantly from stimulus to stimulus. Social media, notifications, endless content, constant stimulation. You've essentially trained yourself to have the attention span of a goldfish. And the voice loves this. Because when you can't sustain attention, you can't see clearly. You're always swept up in the thoughts and emotions and reactions, never able to step back and observe the pattern. Concentration training changes this. You learn to place your attention somewhere, your breath, a sound, a sensation, and keep it there. Not forever, not perfectly, but for increasingly longer stretches. And something remarkable happens. When your mind settles, when the constant jumping slows down, you begin to see what's been there all along. Remember the cascade we talked about? That waterfall of 60,000 thoughts? When you first try to meditate, you encounter it fully. And it's shocking. The sheer volume of mental noise, the relentlessness of it. Thought after thought after thought, barely any space between them. This is what the tradition calls the first stage of meditation development. It's not peace. It's discovery. The discovery of just how chaotic your mind actually is. And most people quit here. They think, this meditation thing isn't working, I'm worse than before, this isn't for me. But here's what the masters knew. You're not worse. You're awake. You're finally seeing what was happening all along, unconsciously, running in the background of every moment of your life. This is progress, not failure. If you keep practicing, the cascade begins to slow. Not because you're suppressing thoughts, but because you're not feeding them. A thought arises. Let's say, I'm hungry. Normally, you'd follow that thought. I'm hungry. I should eat. What do I want? Maybe that leftover pizza. No, I should eat something healthy, but I deserve a treat. But I'm trying to eat better. Why is this so hard? Why can't I just have discipline? One thought becomes 20 in seconds. But in meditation, you practice differently. Thought arises, I'm hungry, and you notice it. Then you return to the breath. You don't follow the thought train. You don't suppress it either. You just see it and let it pass, the way you'd watch a leaf floating down a stream. Over time, this creates space. The thoughts still come, but there's more room between them. More silence. More peace. And in that space, clarity arises. This is what the tradition calls sati, mindfulness, awareness, the capacity to see what's actually happening rather than being lost in the story about what's happening. The Buddha taught a gradual path. 3 trainings that build on each other. First, sila, ethical conduct, living in a way that doesn't create more suffering. When you lie, cheat, harm others, you create turbulence in your mind. Guilt, anxiety, the need to maintain false stories. This turbulence makes concentration impossible. So you start by cleaning up your behavior. Not to be good or earn merit points, but to create the conditions for a calm mind. Second, samadhi, concentration, the training of attention we're discussing now. When the mind can focus, it becomes stable enough to see clearly. Third, panna, wisdom, the direct seeing of impermanence, not self, and suffering that liberates you from delusion. These 3 aren't separate stages you complete one by one. They support each other. Ethical behavior supports concentration. Concentration reveals wisdom. Wisdom deepens ethics and concentration naturally. But concentration is where most people start practicing. And it's important to know what to expect. In the first week of daily meditation, even just 10 or 15 minutes, you'll mainly experience the cascade. Overwhelming thoughts, constant distraction, the conviction that you're terrible at this. This is perfect. You're seeing clearly for the first time. By month 3, if you've practiced consistently, something shifts. The mind still wanders, but you catch it faster. There are moments, just moments, of genuine stillness. Brief windows where you're actually with the breath, not lost in thought. And those moments feel different. Quieter, softer, like coming up for air after being underwater. By year 1, the practice has changed you in ways you didn't expect. You're not enlightened. You still get angry, anxious, distracted, but you recover faster. You notice the patterns sooner. You have access to choice, where before you only had reaction. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and anger flares. But now there's a split second where you see it arising. And in that split second, you can choose. Do I feed this anger? Do I build a story about this terrible driver? Or do I just let it be anger, arising and passing like everything else. That choice, that tiny moment of freedom, that's what concentration training creates. But here's what people don't understand about meditation. They think the goal is to have no thoughts, to achieve some blissed out state of permanent calm. That's not the goal. The goal is awareness. The ability to see what's happening while it's happening. So when someone says, "I tried meditation and it didn't work, I couldn't stop thinking," that's actually proof it's working. Because the practice isn't to stop thinking. The practice is to notice when you're thinking. Every time you catch yourself lost in thought and return to the breath, that's a success. That's one repetition of the most important mental exercise you can do, the exercise of choosing what you pay attention to. You wouldn't go to the gym, lift a weight once, and say, "This isn't working, the weight is still heavy." You understand that lifting the weight repeatedly, even though it's difficult, is exactly what builds strength. Meditation is the same. Returning to the breath 500 times in a 15-minute session isn't failure. It's 500 repetitions of the most important skill you can develop, the ability to notice distraction and choose presence. The Buddha taught 4 energies that support this practice. First, interest. You need to actually care about this, to see why it matters. Not forced, artificial interest, but genuine curiosity about your own mind. Second, self-esteem. You need to believe you're capable of this, that you're not uniquely broken or hopeless. Third, joy. The practice should be enjoyable, at least sometimes. If it's only grim discipline, you'll quit. Find what makes it pleasant, the quiet, the stillness, the moments of clarity. Fourth, moderation. This is crucial. Don't meditate for 3 hours a day for a week and then burn out. Start with 10 minutes. Do it every day. Let consistency build the foundation. This is right effort. Not maximum effort, but wise effort. Sustainable, balanced, the middle way, applied to practice itself. Every moment of noticing you're distracted is the practice. Every return to the breath is a victory. You're already doing it right. Now, concentration alone won't liberate you. You also need mindfulness in daily life, not just on the meditation cushion. This is where another practice becomes essential. What the Buddha called guarding the sense doors. Indriya samvara, in the old language, sense restraint. Your mind has 6 sense bases: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mind itself, the 6th sense that knows thoughts and emotions. And there's a chain reaction that happens automatically at these sense doors. Contact happens. Your eyes see something. Your ears hear something. Your mind touches a thought. Feeling arises, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Then, automatically, craving follows feeling. If pleasant, you want more. If unpleasant, you want it gone. If neutral, you barely notice it and go looking for something more stimulating. And craving leads to suffering. This chain runs automatically unless you interrupt it. And the place to interrupt it is between feeling and craving. You can't control what you see or hear. You can't always control whether a feeling is pleasant or unpleasant. But you can learn to pause before craving takes over. Let me show you how this works with modern life. You're scrolling social media. Contact. Your eyes see an image. Feeling arises, unpleasant, a tightness in your chest, as you see someone's success and compare it to your own life. Normally, craving immediately follows. You crave to feel different, to have what they have, to be someone other than who you are. And that craving leads to more scrolling, searching for something that will make you feel better, which only makes you feel worse. But with mindfulness, you can catch it. Contact happens. Feeling arises, unpleasant. And right there, you pause. Oh, unpleasant feeling. Tightness in chest. Impulse to keep scrolling arising. And in that pause, you have a choice. Do you follow the craving? Or do you simply acknowledge the feeling and put the phone down? This isn't about never using social media or never experiencing unpleasant feelings. It's about not being controlled by the automatic chain from feeling to craving to suffering. This is what guarding the sense doors means. Not closing yourself off from the world, but being intentional about what you let in and how you respond to it. In the Buddha's time, the main source of sense stimulation was other people and nature. Now, we have infinite stimulation available at every moment. Your phone alone gives you access to more information, more images, more sounds, more content than any human in history had in their entire lifetime. And this matters because every contact creates a feeling. Every feeling has the potential to trigger craving. And you're making thousands of contacts every day, mostly unconsciously, letting the chain run automatically. No wonder you're exhausted. So practicing sense restraint means creating boundaries. Not harsh boundaries that feel like deprivation, but wise boundaries that protect your peace. Maybe you don't check your phone first thing in the morning. Maybe you don't scroll before bed. Maybe you turn off notifications. Maybe you choose one day a week to be device-free. These aren't rules to make you virtuous. They're conditions that support a calm mind. Because here's what happens when you reduce the stimulation. You get bored. And boredom, it turns out, is a gateway. Our culture treats boredom as something to avoid at all costs. The moment you're unstimulated, you reach for your phone, turn on the TV, find something, anything, to fill the space. But the masters knew something different. Boredom is where creativity lives. Boredom is where reflection happens. Boredom is where you actually encounter yourself. In Pali, it's called Yoniso Manasikara, wise attention. The kind of attention that only arises when you're not constantly distracted. When you're bored, you're forced to be with what is. And at first, what is might be uncomfortable. Restlessness, anxiety, the voice wanting to know why you're wasting time. But if you stay with it, if you don't immediately reach for distraction, something shifts. The restlessness settles. The anxiety reveals what it's actually about. The voice quiets because it has nothing to comment on except this moment, this breath, this simple experience of being alive. This is why meditation retreats often involve periods of what seems like doing nothing. Sitting, walking slowly, eating in silence. It's not to torture you. It's to remove the constant stimulation so you can finally see what's underneath. And what's underneath, always, is the choice. The choice to follow craving or not. The choice to build the story or let it dissolve. The choice to be swept away by the feeling or to simply acknowledge it and let it pass. You're not rejecting the world when you guard your sense doors. You're choosing what you let in. And that choice creates space for peace. Now, there's one more practice that supports all of this. One more capacity you need to develop on this path. The ability to be alone. Not lonely, but solitary. Not isolated, but self-sufficient. This might sound contradictory after everything we've said about interdependence and connection. But it's not. The Buddha himself, after his awakening, spent long periods in solitude. And he encouraged his students to do the same. Not as rejection of community, but as essential training for the mind. Because here's the truth. If you can't be at peace alone, you'll use relationships to avoid yourself. You'll seek connection not from wholeness, but from need. Not from choice, but from dependence. And relationships built on need eventually become prisons. There are yogis in the Himalayas who spend years, sometimes decades, in solitary retreat. And when you meet them, they're not grim or withdrawn or socially awkward. They're the most radiant, joyful, present people you'll ever encounter. They've learnt something most of us never learn. That being alone doesn't mean being lonely. Loneliness is the feeling that arises when you believe you need someone else to be complete. Solitude is the peace that comes from knowing you're already whole. The Buddha told his attendant, Ananda, something profound. Ananda had said that spiritual friendship seemed like half of the holy life. And the Buddha corrected him. No, Ananda. Spiritual friendship is the whole of the holy life. This teaching is called Kalyana Mittata, noble friendship, spiritual companionship. You need others on this path. You need teachers, guides, friends who understand the journey. You need community, sangha, that supports your practice and calls you back when you lose your way. But you also need to learn solitude. Because in solitude, you discover whether your peace is real or just borrowed from circumstances. If you can only feel okay when you're with others, when you're busy, when you're distracted, then your peace is fragile. It depends on conditions that will inevitably change. But if you can sit alone in a quiet room and be at peace, not entertained, not stimulated, just simply okay with being, then you've found something real. This is the balance. Solitude for practice, for going deep, for discovering your own capacity for peace. And community for support, for learning, for the joy of connection with others, walking the same path. Neither extreme works. Total isolation becomes self-absorbed, disconnected from the reality of interdependence. Total dependence on others becomes exhausting, draining, a constant search for something external to fill an internal void. But when you can move fluidly between solitude and connection, both become enriching rather than depleting. You sit alone, and it's peaceful. You sit with others, and it's joyful. Neither is running away. Neither is clinging. The teaching here is quality over quantity in relationships. You don't need 100 acquaintances. You need a few genuine friends who understand the path, who support your growth, who reflect your own commitment to waking up. The Buddha called this associating with the wise. Not the famous or successful or impressive, but people who embody the qualities you're trying to cultivate. People who are kind without being weak, strong without being harsh, disciplined without being rigid. People who can sit in silence without discomfort, who can speak truth without cruelty, who can hold your struggles without trying to fix you. These relationships are rare, but one genuine spiritual friendship is worth more than 1,000 casual connections. Because when you're surrounded by people who are also practicing, who are also working to see clearly and live ethically and develop concentration, you're not constantly swimming upstream. The culture around you supports waking up rather than staying asleep. This is why community matters. Why Sangha is considered one of the 3 refuges in Buddhism, alongside the Buddha and the teachings themselves. You take refuge in the Buddha, the possibility of awakening. You take refuge in the Dharma, the teachings that show the way. You take refuge in the Sangha, the community that walks beside you. But even within community, you need to develop your own strength. Your own capacity to be with yourself without needing constant company or validation or distraction. There's a practice some teachers recommend. Spend 1 day a week in voluntary solitude, not as punishment or deprivation, but as training. Turn off your phone. Don't speak to anyone unless absolutely necessary. Just be with yourself for 24 hours. At first, it's excruciating. All the things you usually avoid by staying busy rise to the surface. The anxiety, the restlessness, the voice that says you're wasting time, the compulsion to check your phone even though you know it's off. But if you do this consistently, something remarkable happens. You start to enjoy it. You start to look forward to it. That day becomes not a burden but a gift, a day to reclaim yourself, to remember who you are underneath all the roles and relationships and responsibilities. And then when you return to connection, you bring wholeness instead of need. You're not looking for someone to complete you because you've discovered you're already complete. You're not desperate for validation because you've learned to validate your own experience. You're not running from yourself into the arms of others because being with yourself has become peaceful. This changes everything about how you relate. Relationships become choices, not needs. You connect because you genuinely enjoy the other person, not because you can't bear to be alone. You create space for authentic intimacy because you're not clinging from a place of emptiness. And paradoxically, when you no longer need connection, connection becomes richer. Because now it's two whole people meeting, not two halves, desperately trying to become whole through each other. So learn to be at peace alone. Cultivate solitude as a practice, not as isolation, but as self-discovery. Spend time in silence, in stillness, in the simple presence of your own being without distraction or entertainment or the need to be anywhere other than where you are. And when you've found that peace, bring it back to your relationships. Share it, express it, let it overflow into connection with others who are also learning to be whole. then every relationship becomes a choice, not a need. And that's when real love becomes possible. Not the desperate, grasping kind that needs the other person to stay a certain way forever, but the spacious kind that honors change, celebrates growth, and lets go when letting go serves the highest good of all. This is the path to self-compassion. Not a single technique or practice, but a way of being that emerges from understanding. You understand that peace is your natural state, just obscured. You train concentration so you can see clearly what's obscuring it. You guard your sense doors so you're not constantly triggered into reactivity. You develop the capacity for solitude so your peace doesn't depend on favorable conditions. And through all of this, gradually, naturally, the voice that's been tormenting you begins to quiet. Not because you've suppressed it or fought it into submission, but because you've removed the conditions that sustained it. The belief in a solid self, the craving for permanent pleasure, the resistance to impermanence, the dependence on external validation. As these dissolve, the voice has nothing left to say. And what remains is kindness. Not as something you force yourself to practice, but as what naturally emerges when you're not at war with yourself. You make a mistake, and instead of harsh criticism, there's understanding. Of course you made that mistake. You're human. You're learning. You're shaped by conditions you didn't choose. You feel anxious, and instead of judgment, there's gentleness. Of course you feel anxious. Feeling arises based on conditions. It's not a character flaw. It's just what's present right now. You fall short of your own standards, and instead of despair, there's patience. Of course you fell short. Transformation is gradual. Progress isn't linear. Every moment is a new opportunity to begin again. This is self-compassion, not self-indulgence, not giving yourself permission to harm yourself or others, not abandoning all standards or effort, but treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a good friend who's struggling. Would you tell a friend they're worthless because they made a mistake? Would you tell them they should give up because change is hard? Would you attack them for being human? Of course not. You'd be gentle, supportive, encouraging. You'd remind them of their strengths, acknowledge their efforts, have faith in their capacity to grow. So why do you speak to yourself differently? The path to self-compassion is learning to be your own wise, kind friend. The one who sees you clearly, including your flaws and struggles, and loves you anyway. Not despite your imperfections, but including them, because imperfection is part of being human. You're not trying to become perfect. You're learning to be whole. And wholeness includes everything. The parts of you that shine and the parts that stumble. The moments of clarity and the moments of confusion. The progress and the setbacks. All of it belongs. All of it is part of the path. Because the path isn't about transcending your humanity. It's about fully inhabiting it with wisdom and compassion. And when you do that, when you bring this quality of wise kindness to your own experience, something shifts in how you relate to everything else. You become less reactive, less defensive, less desperate to control outcomes. You become more patient with others' struggles because you're patient with your own. You become more forgiving of human limitation because you've forgiven yourself for being limited. This is the path. Not a straight line to perfection, but a spiral of deepening understanding and expanding compassion. Sometimes you'll feel like you're making great progress. The mind settles easily, insights arise, peace feels stable and real. Sometimes you'll feel like you've lost everything you gained. The mind is chaotic. Old patterns return with a vengeance. You can't remember why you even started this practice. Both of these experiences are normal. Both are part of the path. Because you're not building something new that needs to stay perfect. You're uncovering what was always there, and sometimes more dust becomes visible before it clears. Trust the process. Trust the practice. Trust your own capacity to wake up, even when waking up feels impossible. Because every moment of practice matters. Every time you return to the breath, guard your attention, choose solitude, Extend kindness to yourself. You're creating conditions for transformation. And transformation happens not because you force it, but because you create the space for it. Like a seed planted in good soil, with adequate water and sunlight. You don't make the seed grow. You create conditions, and growth happens naturally. This is what you're doing now. Creating conditions for your own awakening. And the awakening is already happening. In small ways, in quiet moments, in the gradual softening of the voice that once felt like an enemy. Peace isn't something you create. It's what remains when you stop creating suffering. And you're learning to stop. One breath at a time. One moment at a time. One small choice at a time. This is enough. You are enough. Not when you're enlightened, not when you're perfect, not when you've finally fixed all your flaws. Now, in this moment, breathing, alive, aware, doing your best. This is the path to self-compassion. And you're already walking it. Now we come to the practices that change everything. The trainings that transform the heart from a battlefield into a sanctuary. These are called the Brahma Viharas, the divine abodes, the sublime attitudes, the four qualities that the Buddha said lead to a beautiful mind. They're not abstract philosophy. They're practical tools you can use today, right now, in the middle of your messy, complicated, imperfect life. And they begin exactly where you are. Not with grand gestures of universal love, but with something much simpler and much harder. Learning to wish yourself well. The first Brahma Vihara is metta, loving kindness. And it starts with you. This might feel wrong, selfish even. Shouldn't you focus on others first? Isn't self-love just narcissism dressed in spiritual language? But here's what the masters understood. You can't give what you don't have. If your own heart is a war zone, if you're cruel to yourself every moment of every day, how can you offer genuine kindness to anyone else? You might be able to perform kindness, to go through the motions, to do nice things because you think you should. But it won't be genuine. It won't be sustainable. And deep down you'll resent it because you're giving from depletion rather than overflow. So, metta practice begins with self. Not because you're the most important person in the universe, but because you're the foundation. The traditional practice uses 4 phrases. Simple wishes that you direct first toward yourself and later toward others. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease. That's it. 4 simple wishes. But when you first try this, something surprising might happen. You might not be able to say them. The words stick in your throat, or they feel hollow, fake, like you're lying to yourself. Or the voice immediately objects. You don't deserve happiness. You don't deserve ease. Look at all the ways you've failed. This is normal. This is what happens when you've been at war with yourself for so long that peace feels foreign. But stay with it. You don't have to believe the words for them to work. You're not trying to convince yourself of anything or generate feelings you don't have. You're simply planting seeds, offering these wishes to yourself the way you'd water a garden, whether or not you see immediate results. Let's practice right now, just for 30 seconds. Place one hand on your heart. Feel the warmth there, the gentle pressure. And quietly, internally, offer yourself these wishes. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease. Don't force anything. Don't try to feel warm or peaceful or any particular way. Just offer the words, simply and honestly, the way you'd offer water to someone who's thirsty. That's the practice. Now, you might have questions. What if I don't feel anything? What if it feels fake? These are the most common obstacles people encounter with metta practice. If you don't feel anything, that's okay. Metta isn't about generating specific feelings. It's about intention. You're training your mind to move in the direction of kindness, even if the emotional response isn't there yet. Think of it like physical exercise. When you first start lifting weights, you might not feel stronger immediately. But you're still building strength with every repetition, even before you can feel the difference. The same is true here. Every time you offer these wishes to yourself, you're strengthening the capacity for self-kindness, even if it doesn't feel transformative in the moment. And if it feels fake, if the words feel hollow or performative, that's also okay. It probably does feel fake at first, because you've spent years, maybe decades, speaking to yourself in the opposite way. But here's the thing about practice. You don't wait until you feel like being kind to yourself before you practice kindness. You practice kindness, and eventually, the feeling follows. It's like smiling even when you don't feel happy. Research shows that the physical act of smiling can actually shift your mood, even if the smile started as a deliberate choice rather than a spontaneous expression. Metta works the same way. You offer the wishes even when they feel forced, and gradually, imperceptibly, your relationship with yourself begins to shift. Now let's make this practical. How do you use metta in daily life, not just in formal practice? Try this. You're stuck in traffic. The car in front of you is driving too slowly, and you can feel irritation rising. Instead of letting that irritation build into anger and a story about terrible drivers, pause. Take a breath and silently offer metta. May I be at ease. May I be patient. May I let go of what I can't control. Just that. Just redirecting your attention from irritation to kindness, from judgment to ease. Or you're about to have a difficult conversation. Your stomach is tight. Your mind is racing with what you want to say and how the other person might respond. Before you begin, take 30 seconds for metta. May I be clear. May I be kind. May I speak my truth without harming. May I be safe. This isn't magic that will make the conversation easy, but it creates a different foundation. Instead of entering from a place of defensiveness or attack, you enter from a place of intention. or you mess up. You say something you regret. You make a mistake at work. You snap at someone you love. The voice immediately starts its assault. You're such an idiot. Why do you always do this? You never learn. And right there, in the middle of that attack, you can interrupt with metta. May I be kind to myself even when I make mistakes. May I learn from this without drowning in shame. May I be patient with my own humanity. This is the real practice. Not sitting peacefully on a cushion, wishing yourself well, but bringing that same quality of kindness into the moments when you most want to attack yourself. Start with 30 seconds a day. That's it. Just 30 seconds of placing your hand on your heart and offering yourself these simple wishes. You can do it in the morning when you wake up, or at night before sleep, or during a break in your day. 30 seconds. That's all. Because consistency matters more than duration. Better to practice for 30 seconds every single day than to do an hour-long session once and never return to it. And as metta toward yourself grows stronger, you begin extending it outward. First to people you love. May they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be safe. May they live with ease. Then, to neutral people, the cashier at the store, the person you pass on the street, someone you don't know well but don't have any negative feelings toward. Eventually, even to difficult people, those who've hurt you, those you've hurt, those you struggle with. This progression isn't random. It's strategic. You build the muscle with easy targets first, then gradually increase the difficulty. But it always begins with self. Because if you can't wish yourself well, genuinely and consistently, you can't authentically wish it for anyone else. Metta is the antidote to ill will. The traditional teaching says that wherever ill will arises toward yourself or others, metta can dissolve it. Not by suppressing the anger or pretending it doesn't exist, but by offering a different perspective. This person who hurt me, they also want to be happy. They're also struggling with their own hindrances, their own conditioning, their own pain. This doesn't excuse harm. It doesn't mean you have to trust them again or let them back into your life. But it means you're not imprisoned by hatred. You're not burning yourself with the fire of resentment, hoping it will somehow hurt them. You're free. And that freedom begins with being kind to yourself. Start with 30 seconds a day. That's it. Just 30 seconds of wishing yourself well. The second Brahma Vihara is karuna, compassion. If metta is the wish for happiness, karuna is the response to suffering. It's the part of you that sees pain in yourself or others and doesn't turn away. Most of us are terrible at this, especially toward ourselves. When we suffer, we either numb out or attack ourselves for suffering. You feel anxious, and instead of compassion, you judge yourself for being anxious. You feel sad, and instead of tenderness, you tell yourself to get over it. You're in pain, and instead of care, you criticize yourself for weakness. Karuna practice is learning to do the opposite. To recognize your suffering as real and worthy of tenderness. There's a bodhisattva in Buddhist tradition named Avalokiteshvara, the embodiment of compassion. The story says that Avalokiteshvara looked at the suffering in the world and was so moved that his head split into 11 pieces from the overwhelm. And instead of giving up, each piece became a new head, each one seeing suffering more clearly, each one more committed to responding with compassion. This isn't about being overwhelmed by suffering. It's about the willingness to stay present with it, to see it clearly, and to respond with care rather than judgment. Here's a practice you can try right now. Think of something you're struggling with. Maybe it's anxiety about the future. Maybe it's pain from the past. Maybe it's a mistake you made that you can't stop thinking about. Place your hand on your heart. Feel the warmth there. And speak to yourself the way you'd speak to a small child who came to you crying. You wouldn't say, "Stop crying. You're being ridiculous. This isn't a big deal." You'd say, "I see you're hurting. I'm here. It's okay to feel this way." You're not alone. Do that for yourself now. I see that I'm hurting. I'm here for myself. It's okay to feel this way. I'm not alone. This is karuna. Self-compassion as a practice, not just a concept. The biggest block people encounter is the belief that they don't deserve compassion. The voice says, "But I don't deserve kindness because I did this terrible thing, because I'm not trying hard enough, because other people have it worse, because I should be stronger than this." And here's where you need to understand something crucial. Compassion isn't about deserving. You don't earn compassion through good behavior or lose it through mistakes. Compassion is what you offer to suffering, period. If you saw a stranger bleeding on the street, you wouldn't ask if they deserved medical care before calling for help. You'd respond to the suffering you see. The same applies to your own pain. It doesn't matter if you think you caused it, or if you think you shouldn't be feeling it, or if you think others have it worse. Pain is pain, and pain deserves care. So when the voice says, "You don't deserve compassion," that's exactly when you most need to practice it. Here's how to apply this in real moments. You fail at something important. You didn't get the job. The relationship ended. The project fell through. The voice immediately starts. "See, you're not good enough. You never were. This proves it." And instead of believing that, you pause. Hand on heart. Deep breath. This hurts. Of course it hurts. Failure is painful for everyone. I'm allowed to feel disappointed without it meaning I'm worthless. Or you're embarrassed. You said something awkward. You tripped in public. You made a social mistake. And now, you can't stop replaying it. Instead of drowning in shame, you meet it with compassion. I'm embarrassed right now. This feeling is uncomfortable, but it's temporary. Everyone makes social mistakes. I can be gentle with myself while I learn. Or you're in pain, physical, emotional, spiritual. Just pain with no clear solution. Instead of demanding it go away or judging yourself for having it, you acknowledge it. This is painful. I don't have to fix it right now. I can just be with it, the way I'd sit with a friend who's hurting. The prison story illustrates this perfectly. In prisons, when people are put in solitary confinement, the greatest torture isn't the isolation itself. It's being alone with their own minds, with all the things they've done, with all the voices telling them they're irredeemable. The people who need self-compassion most are often the ones who judge themselves most harshly. And the practice is the same, whether you're in a prison cell or in your own mind. You see the pain. You don't turn away from it. You don't try to fix it immediately. You just say, I see this suffering. It's real. It deserves care. What would the Buddha say to someone like you? Not to someone perfect, someone who never makes mistakes, someone who has it all figured out. To someone like you, right now, with all your struggles and imperfections and pain. He'd say, you're doing your best with the conditions you have. You're shaped by forces beyond your control. And you're worthy of compassion, not because you've earned it, but because you're a being who experiences suffering. You've been so cruel to yourself for so long. What if you tried kindness just once? The third Brahma Vihara is mudita, sympathetic joy. This is the practice of celebrating good fortune in yourself and others. And it's surprisingly difficult. We live in a culture of comparison where someone else's success feels like your failure. Where good news triggers envy instead of joy. You see someone achieve something you wanted, and instead of celebrating with them, something in your chest tightens. They got what you wanted, which means you didn't. Which means you're less than, falling behind, not enough. This is what the tradition calls the three cousins of mudita. Envy for those above you, those who have what you want. Competition for those at your level, those you measure yourself against. contempt for those you perceive as below you, those you judge, to make yourself feel better. All three are forms of comparison. All three create suffering. All three prevent genuine connection. Mudita is the antidote. It's training your heart to expand rather than contract in the face of others' happiness. The practice starts with yourself. When something goes well for you, can you celebrate it without immediately undermining it? You accomplish something, and the voice says, "Well, it wasn't that impressive. Anyone could have done it. It was probably just luck." Or you feel happy, and the voice says, "Enjoy it while it lasts. Something bad will happen soon to balance it out." Mudita practice is allowing yourself to feel joy without shame or superstition. I did well today. I can acknowledge that. I can feel good about it without ego, without making it mean I'm better than others. Just simple recognition of effort and outcome aligning. Then you extend it outward. Someone you love succeeds, and you genuinely celebrate with them. No hidden jealousy, no secret wishing you were in their position, just pure happiness for their happiness. This is easier with loved ones. But the real practice is extending it to everyone. That colleague who got promoted instead of you. Can you wish them well? Can you genuinely hope their success continues? Not as a spiritual performance, but as freedom from the prison of comparison. The teaching says that rejoicing in virtue creates merit. When you celebrate goodness, yours or others, you create positive karma. Not because some cosmic accountant is keeping score, but because you're training your mind to move toward joy rather than toward resentment. And what you practice grows. If you practice envy, envy strengthens. If you practice mudita, the capacity for joy expands. The Buddha was remarkably practical about this. He said, "Don't believe anything just because I said it or because it's in ancient texts. Test everything yourself." This teaching is called the Kalama Sutta, and it's the Buddha's scientific method. Approach these practices like experiments. Try mudita for a week. When you notice envy arising, deliberately practice celebrating the other person's success instead. See what happens. Does it make you happier or more miserable? Does it create connection or isolation? Does it free you or trap you? You'll discover that every time you celebrate someone else's joy, you train your heart to expand. And an expanded heart is a happy heart. The fourth Brahma Vihara is upekkha, equanimity. This is the most misunderstood of the four, so let's be clear about what it isn't. It isn't indifference. It isn't numbness. It isn't not caring. Equanimity is caring deeply while remaining balanced. It's the capacity to stay present with whatever is happening, success or failure, praise or blame, pleasure or pain, without being thrown off center. The tradition teaches about the 8 worldly winds, 4 pairs of opposites that blow through every life. Gain and loss, fame and disrepute, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. Most people are tossed around by these winds. When things go well, you're elated, convinced this is how life should always be. When things go poorly, you're devastated, certain you'll never recover. Equanimity is the stillness at the center of the storm. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you understand impermanence so deeply that you're not shocked by change. There's a story about a master who remained completely calm during a crisis that sent everyone else into panic. When asked how he could be so peaceful when disaster was unfolding, he said, "I'm not indifferent to what's happening. I care deeply. But I also know that this, like everything else, is impermanent." Reacting with panic won't help. Staying clear and present might. This is equanimity embodied. It's the difference between being reactive and responsive, between being controlled by circumstances and working skillfully with them. Here's how to practice this in real time with the 8 wins. You receive praise for something you did. The normal response is to cling to it, to let it define you, to feel anxious about whether you can maintain that standard. With equanimity, you acknowledge the praise. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then you let it go, knowing that praise is impermanent, that it doesn't change your fundamental worth, that tomorrow someone might criticize the exact same thing. You receive criticism. The normal response is defensiveness, shame, or anger. With equanimity, you listen. Is there truth in this criticism that I can learn from? If yes, I'll take that and improve. If no, I'll let it pass like weather. Either way, I'm not defined by someone else's opinion. You experience pleasure, a beautiful day, a delicious meal, a moment of connection. With equanimity, you enjoy it fully, knowing it won't last, savoring it precisely because it's temporary. You experience pain, physical discomfort, emotional difficulty, loss. With equanimity, you acknowledge it without adding the suffering of resistance. This hurts. Of course it does. And like everything else, it will change. The practice is learning to stay grounded when life falls apart and staying humble when everything goes right. Not being thrown by success or crushed by failure. I'm still learning, like everyone. That's the phrase to remember. When you succeed, I'm still learning. When you fail, I'm still learning. It's honest without being defeating. It acknowledges imperfection without making it an identity. Now here's how all 4 Brahma Viharas work together as a progressive training. You start with metta, learning to wish yourself and others well. Then karuna, learning to respond to suffering with care rather than judgment. Then mudita, learning to celebrate good fortune without comparison. Finally, upekkha, learning to stay balanced through all of it. Each one builds on the previous. Each one supports the others. Metta without karuna becomes superficial, just positive thinking without depth. Karuna without mudita becomes heavy, only seeing suffering, never joy. Mudita without upekkha becomes dependent on circumstances, your happiness tied to things going well. But together, they create a heart that's both tender and strong, caring and balanced, open and stable. This is the heart of freedom. Loving fully, without clinging. Seeing suffering clearly, without being destroyed by it. Celebrating joy genuinely, without needing it to last forever. Staying present with whatever comes, without being controlled by it. This is what the practices lead to. Not perfection, but wholeness. Not immunity to life's difficulties, but the capacity to meet them with wisdom and compassion. Start small. 30 seconds of metta a day. A moment of self-compassion when you're struggling. One genuine celebration of someone else's happiness. One conscious breath when the winds start blowing. These small practices compound. They create a foundation that becomes unshakable, not because nothing can touch you, but because you know how to work with whatever touches you. This is the heart of freedom. Loving fully, without clinging. You've walked a long way in these hours together. From the exhaustion of the performance, through understanding the roots of suffering, into practices that transform how you relate to yourself and the world. And now comes the question everyone asks.